Hello everyone, my name is Allison Merker Garner and I am the creator and author of Musical Minds. I'm so glad you're here today. We are going to spend about an hour going over something rather specific. We're going to focus on the children that haven't started an instrument yet or are in the process of beginning. So we're going to look at things to do in group class for these children and carry it through to different situations, like a private lesson or playing online if you're teaching online still. Things that you can do. So first of all, let me introduce myself. I am a violin and piano teacher, and I have been teaching for 35 years, and I have taught classroom music, K through 5. I have taught in preschools, and I have my first degree from Indiana University, where I studied with Paul Biss and Joseph Gingold in violin. I have an extensive Suzuki background, and I have supplemented that with my master's degree, which is in interrelated arts, music education, and child development. Because of my interest in creating an environment where my students can grow as people as well as on their instrument, that includes a lot of other disciplines. So I've researched extensively in cognitive science and educational psychology, in other music education methods such as ORF, Kodály, music learning theory, Delcros, and somewhat music mind games and creative ability development. I have done a lot of writing about this material and what I have arrived at through articles. I have 12 workbooks for children, and I am in the process of writing a book for teachers. So this is my life's work. And the importance of it right now, I think, is great, because we all want to be true to the method we're teaching, whatever that is, Suzuki or otherwise. And we want to do the best by our students and their families that we can, give them as much as we can. But we also need to take care of ourselves in the process. And that means being more aware and present in your own situation. So Musical Minds addresses all of these things so that we as teachers are nurtured as much as our children are, our students are, and our families are. So let's go directly into teaching littles, which is what this is about. So littles would be ages 3 to 7, depending on the maturity level, the developmental level. So I start my students before they even get to a private lesson. I start them in a group class that I call Music Time. Music Time is a class where they can explore playfully, be curious, investigate, experiment, and discover not only what interests them and connects them to the art of music, but they learn something about themselves in the process. And once that relationship, that personal connection is made in the class, they get excited and want to direct that learning. So the engagement, the igniting the spark, as my introductory course calls it, is just the beginning. You have to create the environment for that. Then it happens. And we're just getting going at that point. So this particular session will talk about the point at which a child gets that spark, gets that interest, and extending it. Now, my introductory course goes into this with great detail, with many examples of activities I do. But this will give you a start in the thinking process that I go through when I am creating that opportunity. So, here is an example. We're in a class. These children are either not starting an instrument yet, or they are starting an instrument, but they're still in the twinkles, maybe a pre-twinkler, or they've just finished learning twinkle and they're not quite to lightly row yet. And this class is going over some musical concept. And we explore that musical concept in a myriad of ways. What am I thinking when I'm doing that? I'm thinking of how my senses are involved. That's what I'm after. The intellectual, concept forming, abstract thought. I'm thinking about basic sensory response. So in a music class, what are those things? Well, musically, let's go backwards and look at what we're actually teaching. Musically, it's mostly sound, isn't it? It's the first sense we think of. We're developing the ear, we're developing auditory skills. What Edwin Gordon referred to as audiation. The ability to hear with discernment. But is that an isolated thing? I don't think it is. I think that as musicians, we're movement specialists. So there's a kinesthetic association to what we hear and the sound that we produce. Well, is it really limited to that? I mean, there's also the visual element. We see things on a page. We see our hands move. We see where we're shifting to. We see the note that we're going to play that's an octave higher on the keyboard. There's a visual element that's very immediate to learning an instrument. So we have a number of elements that we can use. And I actually also include in that texture and feel, the tactile element. Not just in playing, because there is a tactile element in playing, that's definitely there. But I start working on that and creating opportunities to develop it before we start an instrument. So in a group class of children that are beginners, my music time class, these are the things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about sensory elements. So here's an example of this. I will have let's do a simple chant. Something that will grab their attention right away and is musical. And I will say it musically. such as higgledy-piggledy-pop, the dog has eaten them up. The pig's in a hurry, the cat's in a flurry, higgledy-piggledy-pop. So what are the musical elements of that chant? What grabbed you about it? Think about, was it the change in pitch? Was it the dynamics? Was it the tempo? Because it didn't stay the same. It did fluctuate. Is it the rhythm of the words or the form? What elements, musical elements, are in that you respond to? I'm going to say it again, and just be aware of how you're responding to it. Higgledy-piggledy-pop, the dog has eaten them up. The pig's in a hurry, the cat's in a flurry, higgledy-piggledy-pop. So, first thing, I didn't do it the same way. We are not replicating performance, are we? It changes a little bit every time we do it, just like we change. We're not always the same. So that's the first element to notice. The second element is, what did you respond to? Now I'm going to do it a third time, and I want you to respond to a different element that you didn't immediately latch onto. It can be tempo, it can be dynamics, it can be pitch, it can be rhythm, it can be form, any of those things, or something else that I hadn't thought of. Higgledy-piggledy-pop, the dog has eaten them up. The pig's in a hurry, the cat's in a flurry, higgledy-piggledy-pop. So I'm deliberately not using movement, which is hard for me, but just listening to the chant. What did you respond to this time? What was the other thing that you hadn't been as aware of the first time? And what you're experiencing is what your students are experiencing every time they hear it. And when I do anything like this, I repeat it ad nauseum. There are many times they hear the same thing. It's a little different every time. And my thinking is, not only are they able to memorize it and imitate it later, but they're getting used to the idea of improvisation, because it's not always the same. They're getting used to the idea of expression, because I'm not saying it with a monotone. So they're responding to it on multiple levels, just this little chant. And then we extend it. We take that chant and we put it in different settings. Now, depending on what you want to be teaching your children, it may be something that has to do with one element. You may want to focus on rhythm that day. If not, you may want to go toward pitch or tempo and dynamics. Whatever you choose to do, however, can be extended. And once you start extending, once you start bringing in other sensory elements, language, art, music, dance, any of those other ways of experiencing something, then you start to get the engagement you want. Because one child is going to really, really enjoy the rhythm. Another child will find the expressive qualities really engaging. And that's when you as a teacher step back, observe what's going on, and respond accordingly. Start letting go of some of the control you have over your lesson plan. So here's Here's how we would do that for a higgledy-piggledy pop. Add some movement to it. You can make up the movement. You can just do a clap on the pops. Anything like that you can do in a private lesson, in a group class, online. You don't have to go get an instrument, though you could. If you've got a beginning student, you can have them play open A on the pop, just so they start relating rhythm to their instrument and having to coordinate those motions in time. But you could easily just do it as a clap or a stomp. So you've lifted out one word. How many times does it happen? Twice. They've got to be ready 2 times. When they hear that pop, that's when they move. So let's take rhythm a little further. We've got playing or making a sound or a movement on the pops. Then we can assign that to a child. We can then have the other kids place it within a meter. Now you could do that on the instrument once again, or just with clapping and tapping. So I'm slapping my thighs and then clapping, and I have 2 4-meter. Higgledy piggledy pop! The dog has eaten the mop. The pig's in a hurry, the cat's in a flurry, higgledy piggledy pop. And so now we have another line to our texture. And we can then add what I call a bourdon. A bourdon comes from the Orff method, and it is usually played on a barred instrument, xylophone, marimba, metallophone, and it's an open fifth that's often in half notes. It provides a tonal center. And the child that does the bourdon is the child that is rock solid with tempo. Otherwise, you have disastrous consequences. Now, you don't need to go out and buy a whole set of Orff instruments. I have them. I have saved up money for 25 years to get them because I love the sound. But you can do an open fifth on the piano. You can do open strings. You do not have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. And hearing the instrument that they're going to play or that they're starting is not a bad thing either, is it? So I think that you can argue both ways. So no worries about saving up your money for that. So perfect fifth, half notes. It would sound like this. Higgledy-piggledy pop. The dog has eaten the mop. The pig's in a hurry, the cat's in a flurry, higgledy-piggledy pop. All right, so you have another line. So we have the pops, we have the 2 4-meter, we have the bourdon. Now that is plenty, but we're working on what? Some subdivision. We're working on rhythm, being able to know when to come in, listening for that, knowing what to do when we do it. And we're introducing the idea of meter. If you wanted to add another line, you could do an ostinato pattern. Ostinato being a repeated rhythmic pattern in this case. That would have some of the rhythms that you find in the chant. Higgledy-piggledy pop. It's in 6/8, or if you wanted to use triplets, you could. But I would just use quarter notes. Not try to do 8 notes with that. The 2s against 3s, we won't do that. So, but you could do the triplets too. Triplet, triplet, hickety, picklety, pop, and then somebody's doing that. So every different line, it is taking rhythm out and using it within the context of something musical. We're practicing musical response within something musical. We're not isolating it out and doing it without any meaning. So that's an example of a group class. Now, I would do a lot of other things in that group class that would reinforce whatever things that I wanted to teach that day. The children will come up with their own ideas of what they want to do. If we add the element of language, we already have language, we may add something that has imagery to it, like a story. Or we may put a movement play into this particular chant, and it lends itself well to dramatic play. But the movements need to reflect the rhythm. And in this case, also the action in the chant. So when you start to expand and extend an activity, you've extended it musically. Now we're extending it sensorially, where we're adding an imagery element or a kinesthetic element to what we're hearing. And that's when children get engaged. That's when they get excited about something. That's when they get ideas. And I let them go with it. I let them, somebody says, oh, you know what we could do with that story? We could do this. And it's some musical response to it that they are associating with what we just did with Higgledy Piggledy Pop. So we do it that way. And then inevitably somebody else has another idea. And whether it's an idea that works or it doesn't work, we still do it because we discover that way what works and what doesn't work. And who am I to say it doesn't work? Sometimes the things that I think are, the children feel differently. So I don't pass judgment on that. So that's when you not only get the engagement, but you get the extension of that engagement, that relationship with music and owning it as your own thing. That's when that happens. And so my job at that point is to be a kind of traffic cop where I see to it everybody gets a chance to have their own response and then encourage discussion. We're going to work on this together. I'm going to give you 5 minutes and I want you to come up with some movement for this because you're interested in that. Go and do it. Some of the kids want to put it on their instrument right away. Put it on your instrument. Take 5 minutes and figure out the rhythm and play it on your instrument. It depends on what they're interested in, either as a group or individually. Now, the traffic cop has to be mindful that this is a group and we're not splitting off into factions. In the private lesson, whether it's online or live, that's when we can actually get into something that's personal. You know that thing we did in group class? You had a good idea about that. Did you explore that? Let's explore that. Let's see where that goes. And that is when it gets to be a personal relationship with the art form. Now, do I spend the whole lesson on this? No. I have an agenda, particularly in private lessons. We've got technique to get to. We've got notes to learn. We've got listening to do. But it can all relate. It's not isolated. It's not like we did that little activity and then it's done. That's boring. It changes just like we change. So today, we may do higgledy-piggledy-pop because of the rhythm, but tomorrow, it's going to be how we learn triplets. Or it's going to be the way we learn tempo, or dynamics, or pitch. We use it in a different way. We haven't learned that one thing just for that one activity. When you start doing that, you're being creative, and they're being creative. So I want to use a song and go through all of its different ways of exploring it and knowing it. And I'm going to take as many elements, sensory elements and musical elements, to that song and go through the process. Now, in my introductory course, and particularly in my level classes, we do this with a multitude of things. But in here, I just want you to get an idea of it. Now, I will preface this by saying this is what I do, or here's an example of what I do. But when you're in this situation and it's you and not me, and you have your students and not my students, you may do something very different. And that's good. This is where Musical Minds addresses the need of the teacher. You may not be comfortable with the things I'm comfortable with. And you may be able to do things I can't do. And it's all good. I'm not here to teach you to be an expert and a master of all things. I certainly am not. So I don't expect any teacher to be. But we do have our strengths. We do have our comfort levels. We do have the things that brought us to this field that we're passionate about. And that's what we play to. So when I give examples, these are examples for me. You can use them, or you can modify them, or you can go in the direction you're comfortable in, which may be completely different. And that's what I want you to discover. The introductory course helps you to identify those things and those ways of being. That when you come to the end of a day, you're not spent, or you feel like you've been performing the whole day. And then you have your own children to teach. You know, I want you to feel just as excited as you did when you were 5 years old starting the piano. So we all have that in us, and we can all access it. So that said, let's take a song that, it has several different pitch patterns in it. It's a more complicated song than maybe what I would start with on the beginning day. But it is a song that I use in a beginning class, maybe just a little bit down the road. So it's called Here Comes a Bluebird. Here comes a bluebird in through my window. Hey, deedle-dum a day, day, day. Take a little partner, tap them on the shoulder. Hey, deedle-dum a day, day, day. It is a singing game, so there's movement to it. It has teachable elements galore. So it has what rhythmically? It has quarter notes, eighth notes, and then half notes. What does it have melodically? It has several pitch patterns. It has the mi, re, do, and if you don't know solfege, that is fine. You can just do hand placement to indicate the traveling of the melody going up and down, and that's plenty. So you don't have to do mi, re, do. You can do da, da, dum, E, D, C, however you want to do it, but just showing that your voice is dropping when you do that by steps. The other pitch pattern I call so, mi, la. So it starts on the 5th scale degree, so, the 3rd, mi, la, which is the 6th, da, da, dum, okay? So I see that 2 pitch patterns that I can explore. And then we have sensory elements that we can use. We have movement we can use. We can accompany this and rhythmically. We have a melody. We have aural elements. We have kinesthetic elements. We have visual elements by showing the movement of the melody. We can even put a harmony to it if we wanted to use a pitch pattern to put a harmony to it if we wanted to do that. That's the direction you want to go in. So it's a very teachable tune. The movement is children take hands in a circle facing the center of the circle. They walk in the circle to their right. I see a bluebird in through my window. Hey, deedle-dum-a-day, day, day. And the child in the center of the circle is the bluebird. And everybody wants to be the bluebird. And so, actually, yes. So the bluebird goes to any child in the circle, taps them on the shoulder, they switch places, and you have a new bluebird. And as that's happening, the children bring up their arms so that we have archways underneath the arms. And the bluebird can go in and out the circle underneath those arms. And then when it starts again, I see a bluebird, we're back down. So sometimes we get bluebirds caught in the windows, but that's something they gotta work out. We don't want that. So they've got to time it so that doesn't happen. So one word about this, kids aren't getting these singing games. 30 years ago when I was doing this, the kids instinctively, knew what to do. I didn't have to explain, oh, you have to listen for this and you need to get out of the circle by such and such a time. They instinctively knew because they were getting it either at school or on the playground or, with the neighborhood kids or whatever. But a lot of the kids I'm getting now don't have that. And so they don't know. They're starting earlier in their experience on it. So I allow them to make the mistakes and learn, what has to happen. So just a word on that. You may not have intuitive learners here, and that's quite okay. So we do this game until everybody gets a turn. So how many times they hear it, I don't know, 8, 10, and they can sing it by the end, they're singing along with me. So they're getting that ear training, they're getting the vocal use, they're coordinating it with movement. And then we take some element of that tune and have a musical concept from that. It can be rhythm, it can be pitch, it can be melody or melodic patterns, it can be anything you want it to be. And then we explore that in a number of musical ways. Using instruments, movement again, placement of hands in singing, notation, putting it out there with the rhythm, or putting it out there with the melody, improvising, taking a pitch pattern and replacing it with another one. How does that make the song sound different? Let's look at those pitch patterns and how they're written out. Let's sing them. All those different ways can then be explored once they've heard it enough and moved to it enough. And then we start, in the group class, we start creating the space to associate that or apply that knowledge to the instrument. So, how do we do that? We can take our ostinati or bourdon and translate that into a movement that makes sound. One of the ways that I do that is using dowel rods. Now, you don't need to go out and buy dowel rods. I got mine off of Amazon. You can get them different lengths. I prefer longer rather than shorter. But you can also, I used for years and years and years, because they were light, I used a broom handle. So I took the broom off, or the mop, and you had sticks, and they were about the right length, right? So you could use those. Need two, unless you've got a big class and you want multiple of these, but I usually just use one pair, and there's a child on either side of those sticks. Now, the rhythm, we may practice this. In fact, we would practice this with the tune. Would be quarter, quarter, half. So it would be legs, legs, hands. It's the same as, if you saw my movement video, it's the same as step, step, shape, same rhythm. So we may even do step, step, shape, just to get a feel for this. I see a bluebird in through my window, day, deedle, dama, day, 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 right? So if you have dowel rods, you have to hold them this way so that fingers don't get pinched. So that's the only thing that you really have to get used to, but kids are quick on it. And if they've coordinated with their partner on the other side of the sticks, they're doing this against the floor. Down, down, together, and it makes a clicking sound. Now, okay, you're online or you're in a private lesson. You can just do it this way, right? We're really after the sound. The movement's great, but this makes it a little bit more fun in a group class setting. And then I'll have a child be the dancer. And this has to be a really coordinated kid. And the rhythm that they use is 8/8 quarter, 8/8 quarter, 8/8 quarter. So it would be, I see a bluebird in through my window. I see a bluebird. We got two rhythms going now. The movement for this is step, step, step. We've got the dowel rods here. The dancer starts over here. And when the dowel rods are doing quarter, quarter, they're apart. That's when the dancer can put two steps in there, right, left. And when they go to the right, outside of the other dowel rod, the dowel rods are like this. So if you don't coordinate it right, you're going to get caught between those dowel rods, right? So they're having to coordinate quarter, quarter, half with 8/8 quarter, 8/8 quarter. And of course, we take turns. We do it from all angles. Everybody gets an opportunity. And then I'll put a kid over on a bourdon, just the half notes on one of the barred instruments. So we have that going, right? And we're still singing it. We're still rehearsing it. We're getting a feel for all of those rhythms together and practicing the melodic patterns that I want to lift out and use in another setting or another opportunity. So we're doing that. Now, if we have an advanced student that knows lightly row, or then sometimes I do it, that's what I will put on top. So we have yet another line, and we lift out the tune and replace it with a Suzuki piece. So we have da 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 bum bum bum, and they can sing it along with me while I play it, or not. But they usually do. They usually hum it because they're internalizing their step, shape rhythm. They're internalizing eighth, quarter, eighth. They're internalizing half. They're internalizing all of those and externalizing them as well. So a lot of times, yeah, they'll do that, which I love because that's kind of a Kodai concept, to be able to do all the parts at the same time, right? And that's really hard. It's a very challenging thing to do, but when you can, you know where the beat is. You know where the subdividing is, or the doubling of the beat. So that would be the group class setting. Now we would go off and do other things, and I would let the kids kind of direct do we write this out? Do we add another line? Do we perform it? What do we do? What's the next direction? Do we add a story to it? Do we put it in a form? You know, that's group class. In a private setting, whether it's online or live, as I said, you can do this without dowel rods. And you can have a parent involved or a sibling involved if you wanted to add parts. So if you wanted your student to play lightly row and have this percussion going on behind them, that's really exciting. That's fun. It's a little disconcerting at first if they're not used to it. You can do that. You could also, and oh, let me get my violin for this. You can also take some aspect of that tune and create an opportunity to lift that part out and use it as a technical exercise toward the instrument at this level. Now, I'm not getting into anything more complicated. Once again, that's for the course levels. But this gives you an idea that once you've done it in the group class on all these different sensory and musical levels, then you can step into the lesson and take that knowledge and extend it toward the instrument directly. For example, I see a bluebird. We have the so mi, or the 5th scale degree to the 3rd scale degree, which is a minor third. The beginning of lightly row starts with that open E to 2 for us violinists. It is a tune that we use in piano, so 5 to 3. And the violists and cellists use lightly row as well in their repertoire. So this is a universal tune. And the hardest thing with lightly row at the beginning is being able to coordinate the string change and placing the 2 down. That's a lot to think about. So I sometimes start out in a private lesson doing da da. I see a bluebird in through my window. Hey, deedle dum a day, day, day. Just getting this motion, right? Or I see a bluebird in through my window. We may do it just with finger, right? But we're practicing that motion. Now, before this, I do use something else. I use a tune called Seesaw. That is just that third. So there's an element in this that I'm lifting out that I use as another step toward doing this. But seesaw up and down, it's this motion, right? And we could do it this way. Seesaw up and down, in the air and on the ground. And so we're singing it, we're doing this, and then we can add the one, which I do early because of Twinkle. So we are doing a So Mi La pattern at that point, adding that F sharp, which we've got to do in Twinkle at the very beginning. So that's another lifting out and practicing. So what else do we have in here? We also have hey, deedle dum a day, day, day. It's the last three notes of the scale. Mi, re, do, or the first three if you're going up. Mi, re, do, mi, D, C if you're a pianist. If you're a violinist, C sharp, B, A. So once again, there's another step that we've done in group class, and we've done it the way we've just done the Bluebird song, is hot cross buns. So we'll do or just the fingers, right? And just get that coordinated. And we'll do hot cross buns with single notes or with a Mississippi hot dog rhythm or one of the other rhythms that are in the Suzuki literature, right? So we've gotten those notes down. No string changes or anything like that. It's earlier than lightly row activity. So we make that association when we get to Bluebird. It has that mi, re, do, just like hot cross buns. You know that. Let's do that without the rhythm. All right, let's do it the other direction. Right? Let's do it both ways. We've got it both ways. And then I'll add the triad, which is not in Bluebird. It's in other tunes that we do. So maybe in that same group class, if I'm preparing a bunch of kids for lightly row, we'll do Mousy Mousy or some of the triad tunes that I've done. Do it the same way, use movement, use drama, use language, use story and imagery. And then we learn what the finger pattern is for that. So every time we do something in group class, it's not done. It's not done. You're going to hear about it again. And we've rehearsed the tune so many different ways. They know it cold. And so they've sung it. We've done the hand placement. We've moved to it. We've done it in so many different ways that it's already internalized orally. And so maybe I'll give them a little exercise to mimic the motion that they're going to need to learn to be able to play it on an instrument. And we may do this, before we get it up on the shoulder. So you can always add more and more steps to something to get it a little bit in smaller chunks to learn. You can always do that. But this gives you the idea of the sequencing. We start generally, then we expand that through our senses, through the ways we interact with that musically. We may use other ways of exploring that same thing, that same concept. And then we take it to the lesson, whether it is online, you have to modify a little bit, of course, to do something online, or within the lesson, private lesson, in person. And that's directed directly to that child, where that child is, where you are with that child. So perhaps that child still needs to work out something that we did in group class. That's what we do. Let's do that. How do you want to do that? We worked a lot on this rhythm. Do you want to do that rhythm using your bow on your shoulder? No, I don't feel like doing it that way. Okay, so let's do that story. I have a story. Let's read that story, and when we get to such and such a word, we're going to play it on our instrument. And you'll know when that is because the form repeats itself. You'll know when the A section comes back. And you know what to do. Let's rehearse it. Let's rehearse that. And then we get it. We get that rehearsal in. And then transfer it to the technique required to play it. And as I say, this is for the real beginners. We can do this with the more advanced kids. It's just not about placing fingers or, moving the bow a certain way. But we can do that on more and more and more sophisticated levels. But once we do it at the beginning, and they are interested, and they are engaged, and they get the process, they know that whatever they did in group class, and by the way, they're listening to these CDs at home that I have done. The volume 1 and volume 2 have CDs. So they're listening to these tunes, and they're listening to some of the accompaniment that we would do in class to these tunes. They're listening to all of that. They're hearing the stories. They're hearing the songs. So they're getting it in a multitude of ways, and then they come into a private lesson and they put it to the instrument. And by that time, they've got it so orally learned. And these tunes are simpler than what they're getting in a Suzuki method repertoire. It may not be in other methods, but I feel the need sometimes with these students to really break it down. And doing repetitions of the same thing over and over and over. We're going to do this. Like my first teacher was Japanese, and she would say, play 100 times. And so all that repetition is important. It's important to do it well and correctly, but the kid kind of has to want to. And so how do you get them to want to do that? Well, if it's within a tune they know, or it's within a rhythm they know, or it's within a story they know, and they're participating in something bigger than themselves, and they're part of something, then they do want to do it. And they don't want to stop at that. They want to play the whole tune. They want to do the whole thing. They want to tell the story and they want to play it. So they're thinking in much more complex ways, and they're much more engaged when they do the repetition within some context like this. And what are you doing as a teacher? You're not having to dream up a bunch of fun stuff. You just use one. And it's the thing that you practiced to do in group class that last week. You're not having to come up with 16 new ways of, getting them excited and engaged. It's great if you can do that. I can't. I get tired. So I use what I did in the last class and then use it in a new way. So hopefully this gives you some ideas of what you can do. What I want to leave you with are these 2 points. 1, find out what excites you. Find out what you're passionate about. Find out what your superpower is. It may not be the same. You may be really, really interested and passionate about improvisation, but you're a good performer. That's really where you've put your energy and training. That's good to know. You can use both of them. And the other thing that I want you to think about is, what were you like as a kid? What excited you? Kids are kind of different today, but they're really not. Their environment is different. Their environment is not the same as ours, if you're my age or older. And if you're younger, it can even be different now. So they're the same kids in a different setting. So you've got to meet them where they are. And if they're visual kids or they're kinesthetic kids, you become aware of that. That is a link you can use. That's a connection you can use. And that's a starting place between what you're interested in and you're good at and what they seem to be motivated by. You connect there. And Musical Minds gives you the opportunity and the tools to be able to not only get there and identify it, but find that inspiration and carry it out. And it becomes the momentum for future learning. Then the parent's not over there, saying you got to practice 30 minutes every day. Or, what? You didn't do your reading? I told you to do your reading. You didn't do your listening? Ideally, they all do that stuff. But realistically, they don't always. You do have those that do. Then they're taken care of. It's the rest of the population that we really need to teach in the way they need to be taught. Not in a punitive fashion. Not, you've got to fit with my method. You got to fit with how I want you to do things. I've taught that way. I've done that. With my background, violin was, you just didn't mess around with it. I took it very seriously. I took what I did very seriously, and all of my students better take it seriously. And that worked with a few. It didn't reach everybody. And I didn't like it. After a while, I felt like I was being the mean teacher all the time. That's no fun. And I want these kids being able to express themselves, to grow as people holistically through their art, through their music. And that doesn't require perfection in technique. It's great they have it, but it's not what will keep them going. What will keep them going is something that's more emotionally based and personal, that's not inflicted on them from the outside, but internally excites them, makes them interested, makes them want to do it, makes them want to go to concerts, makes them want to support the symphony, makes them want to go home and relax with the instrument for half an hour after a hard day at work, makes them want to have their kids learn to play an instrument because it's so meaningful to them. Our culture needs it, and we're losing that. So as teachers, I think we have a responsibility to ourselves, and we have a responsibility to our population, our community, to meet them where they are and share this really fantastic thing with them, that they'll discover all this stuff about themselves and what makes them think, and what makes them want to get up in the mornings. So that is Musical Minds for Littles. If you have any questions, any concerns, anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I have my email somewhere. And certainly there's the Facebook group that is called Musical Minds, that is available for free. And I also have courses that I offer for teachers, an introductory course and a level 1 course. And I will have 2, 3, and 4 eventually. And I want you to question and get curious and wonder and see what the possibilities are. Think outside the box, and I'll help you find the niche you need to fill. No one else can fill. As a teacher, as a nurturer, and as a human being. For yourself and for your students. Thank you.